My name is Maximilian Schich. I will be your Master of Ceremony today. And this is Roger Malina, who will give you an introduction to the introduction. And I think we just start and then more later on. Thank you very much.
We might just identify Isabel Merrill. Is she in the room? Is she on at the desk? And Christian. So we have a gang of four that's organized the day. So thank you for coming so early in the morning to the Leonardo Day at the Network Science Conference. We have a very long and rich day. I'm really looking forward to the panel discussion, and hopefully we'll have a lot of time during the day to burrow down a little bit more deeply into some of the topics that are presented. So I'm the executive editor of the Leonardo publications at MIT Press. My own scientific background is in astrophysics. I was originally a physicist in optics. Worked for NASA for many years, and I got introduced to some of these topics in the 1980s when astronomy went digital. And then it went big data in a big way, and so I kind of lived that in the 1980s, which is one of the experiences that has sort of sensitized me to the way some of these technical issues become, to use a fancy word, epistemological. That they actually change the way we do research and the kind of questions that we're able to study. So when Max contacted me a number of years ago after I had been chatting with Laszlo Barabazi, it was with much enthusiasm that we decided to invest sort of energy and groupthink into how we might cross the emerging research in complex networks, in particular with the arts and humanities that are sometimes marginalized in the overall research agendas. Since that time, I've actually become a full-time art and science professor. I now have a position at the University of Texas, Dallas as of this January this year, and I got two faculties to vote for me. I'm a professor of physics, and I'm a professor of art and technology and arts and humanities. So my ambition there is to take the kind of things that we're doing today and really make them run as far as they can run. So that's what I'm going to be doing there. So I have about 10 minutes of introductory comments. I'm going to let Max develop in more depth how, as we've been working together on the complex networks area, certain topics have been bubbling up into focus, other topics receding. And I just wanted to give you a slightly different introductory background. So I'm the editor of the Leonardo publications at MIT Press. Actually, the journal was started by my father in 1967 in Paris, which is several generations ago. And it was an interesting time, actually, in the 1960s, because there was a lot of interest in new ways of interaction between the arts and technology. In the United States, some of you may be familiar with the program called Experiments in Art and Technology, EAT. There was an engineer at the Bell Labs, Billy Kluver, that invested a lot of time at the Bell Labs, actually working with the arts community, cross-fertilizing. I think out of that effort, something like 120 patents were filed. I don't think any of the artists are on the patents, but I'm not sure exactly how Bell Labs handle their IP. Around that time, also, Georgi Kepesh started the Center for Advanced Visual Studies at MIT. Sort of basically is one of the first flag raisers within a technical university, which MIT is focused on, obviously, of the appropriate role of the arts and humanities in the research agenda. And so the 1960s were an interesting time. Interestingly enough, if you had meetings of interested people in those days, you have about as many people as there are in this room. Of course, now the computer industry is hundreds of millions of people. But in the 1960s, the people that were beginning to explore the digital technologies were far and few between, isolated. And in fact, one of the roles that the Leonardo organization has always played is to try and help connect those networks of outliers, people exploring what at the start may be fringe topics, but then become front and fore. So over the years, we've developed a number of publication vehicles. We have the Leonardo Journal, a music journal at MIT Press, which is a classic peer-reviewed journal. I think we had 200,000 articles downloaded last year, which is it's almost a market if you got more than a penny an article download. So there's a lot of interest out there in how the arts and sciences and technology interact these days. We have a book series with MIT Press. So if any of you have book proposals, Max, we welcome book proposals at any time. We're particularly interested in book monographs, not collections of essays. It's our sense that collections of essays are best done online these days, but monographs maybe still have a role in the certainly print on demand or print book context. So that's been a really expanding program. I always like to insist that somehow it is bicameral, it's two-headed. Even though as an astronomer and astrophysicist, I'm very aware that we've been technology-driven, that a lot of the research advances in astronomy have been closely coupled to major steps forward in technologies and mathematics. There is really, from my point of view, two overlapping domains of drive science and technologies. And in the Leonardo publications, we've tried to pay attention to both sides of that. Michael Emmer, who's one of our editors on mathematics, has a very, very long history of just documenting the way that mathematics has fed into the arts and humanities and vice versa. If you probably remember in the 1990s, visual mathematics was kind of a big thing as visualization techniques started being introduced into mathematical research. Michael has published a couple of compendia called The Visual Mind, looking at the ways that mathematics and the arts have interacted. One of the things I mentioned at dinner last night, I think the first article that Leonardo published on graph theory was in 1970, but I didn't have time to go look. And it was a guy called Frank Harari who wrote an article on graph theory for the Leonardo Journal. At that time, actually, knot theory and graph theory were both hot topics in the early 1970s. And so it's interesting how some of these very deep sort of questions reappear periodically as advances in mathematics give new angles of attack. We've tried over the years also to embed these discussions in a historical context. So you'll find in the book series and in the journal historical essays, although in general we focus on the history in the last 100 and 150 years of how art and science, art and technology have interacted, and a little bit of discussion, but not as much as I'd like, in really the philosophy and theory. And there, I think one of the problems that we have in our research communities is that the history of science community and the history of technology community don't often actually share research agendas. And so it would be interesting to foment some of those overlaps also. Over the history of these publications, we've published, I hadn't done an individual count recently, I did for our 40th anniversary, about 7,000 authors. That's a very large creative community of people that sort of navigate between the disciplines of the sciences and the disciplines of the arts and humanities. One of the things that we're very interested in right now, and I'll be interested in your ideas, is how we reinvent the way that we as a professional community document our work and show it to others. This is called experimental publishing and curating if you're looking for funding. But basically, as you're all aware, where the way that we document our work and show our work is really evolving very rapidly. Ironically, if you went back to the 19th century, you'd be writing letters, not articles, and you'd be writing poems. So scientific publication has changed tremendously over the last 2 centuries. And no doubt we're in the middle of a similar deep change in the way that we document and show our work. And obviously that then results in how these unlikely connections get made between research communities. And so I think Max may talk a little bit about the ebook that we've done. It's really quite difficult. We work with MIT Press. I always tell them that they're backing into the future. And it is really difficult to imagine how 30 years from now, as researchers, we'll be working together and sharing our work, reviewing our work, and showing it to others. And so we're interesting as part of the work within the network science community to also think about how network science might inform documenting and sharing work. Just a couple of points of things that it seem to me are quite different between the 1960s when Leonardo started and the present. First, of course, the digital age has totally transformed many of these issues. Here I've just cited the Goldberg and Davidson report on the future of learning institutions, but I think we're beginning to deeply understand how these digital cultures are transformative in the way we do science and the kind of questions that we can attack. I've mentioned here also the citizen science movement. I think one of the things that's really interesting right now is the way thousands of people are willing to collect data for their own purposes and contribute them to scientific research practice. And so clearly that was very different in the 1960s when to get people to meet each other, you basically had to create salons and dinner parties, which we still do, of course. But the second thing is what I'm just calling a critical mass of art science practice. People in this room are kind of weird because you're kind of looking at topic areas in the arts and humanities that are not part of someone's business plan right now. And as you know, so much of the funding and the research sort of priorities that are established are very focused on very near-term sort of return on investment. And so the art, science, and technology community has always been a little bit out there. Am I out of time, Max?
No, yeah.
Okay. The third thing I'm just going to mention, I'm going to call it the hard humanities here, societal urgency. I always like to make the point that there are some problems where we have no choice but to have the sciences, arts, and humanities work together. My son here in in Evanston just started up a company in medical technology to reduce the spread of infection in hospitals. That is a coupled social, technical, biological, medical, institutional problem. You can't attack that except by coupling everything we know about human behavior, for one, but also biological and medical systems. And so some problems just give us no choice to do this kind of coupling. One of the interesting things that's happened, I think, in the last 2-3 years is the attention that's being paid to some of these research practices, in particular from the National Science Foundation and the National Endowment for the Arts. Over the last couple of years, they've been holding workshops, bringing together research communities to figure out how to enable more successful and productive collaboration across the sciences and engineering to arts and design, where here arts is arts and humanities. And those workshops, I think, have been quite interesting. They started off in the IT area, but very quickly it's been the biological sciences, the chemical sciences, the life sciences. And so there seems to be emerging research practices that these agencies are beginning to pay attention to. One of the things that came out of that, and John Maida, who's the president of the Rhode Island School of Design, really has pushed it, is the so-called STEM to STEAM initiative. You probably know that STEM education is science, technology, engineering, and math. At UT Dallas, we don't have enough American students entering into science and engineering to fill the job opportunities we have in the high-tech companies. There are not enough Americans going into science and engineering to fill the jobs in the high-tech companies. And so there's been a broad discussion of how to look at STEM education in a much larger context by introducing the arts and humanities into STEM education and research. The final thing I'll mention is that next week, if I have time over the next few days, this SCAD network is going to put out a call for position papers, an international call, basically looking for ideas from the international community of where the roadblocks are today, where the new opportunities are today that might deserve intense focus. And the idea is that a white paper can be 1 page or 10 pages. It ends with a recommendation. And it ends with a recommendation to someone. So it could be a recommendation to the US president, or it could be a recommendation to Max Schisch. Basically, what are the roadblocks and opportunities right now in these cross-disciplinary research agendas where funding agencies but other stakeholders could play a role in removing roadblocks and enhancing the likelihood of working on those opportunities. The deadline for abstracts is going to be at the end of July, and for white papers in October. I'm going to close there because I'm out of time. So welcome to a full day of presentations and discussion. We plan to organize another such event next year in Copenhagen. Copenhagen, that's where we're going. And so we'll be interested in seeing whether we should focus these days more narrowly on certain topic areas. The panel at the end of the day, I think, will help us look at sort of the landscape of what's emerging, what's sinking, and how these Leonardo days at the Network Science Conference could help move some research agendas along. Thank you very much.